For years, I was told by my doctor that I had acid reflux because I had too much acid inside my stomach, when in fact the opposite was true. In today's video, you'll discover why acid reflux isn't caused by too much acid and what actually causes it, why an endoscopy doesn't always show your root cause problem, why food isn't causing your acid reflux and what really is, why a diagnosis of a hiatal hernia is not your root cause problem and what's likely the issue. And if you stay to the end, we'll give you some supplements you can try even if you tried everything else and nothing worked at all. Most people believe that acid reflux is caused by too much acid or an overproduction of acid. Now, while there are certain situations that do provide a temporary increase in acid, most acid reflux is not caused by too much acid, but by acid in the wrong place. The stomach has a very unique design where the walls of the stomach are able to handle high levels of acid. However, the walls of the esophagus have no such protection. And when you have acid inside your esophagus, it first leads to acid reflux, but can lead to things a lot more serious like Barrett's esophagus or even esophageal cancer. But acid reflux isn't a problem of too much acid. It's an issue of acid in the wrong place. And here we're going to talk about the sphincters that are supposed to keep the acid inside the stomach. You have both an upper esophageal sphincter and a lower esophageal sphincter, and their jobs are to allow food in but don't let stomach acid out. But there are two main reasons that you could end up with stomach acid inside your esophagus causing that burning. The first is that lower esophageal sphincter is not closing properly. Often this is because there is insufficient acid inside your stomach, and if you don't have a stomach that's acidic enough, that lower esophageal sphincter won't close properly. The second problem is that something specifically is interfering with that closing of the lower esophageal sphincter. The effect of both of these is that stomach acid contents come up into the esophagus, creating that burning, acid reflux, GERD, and heartburn. Now, if you've ever had an endoscopy to try to see your root cause problem, unfortunately, it doesn't always show up. What you may see in an endoscopy is a hiatal hernia or inflammation that they call gastritis, but with no obvious cause. But we believe some of the main causes that cause this acid reflux interference with that sphincter don't always show up in your endoscopy, and we're going to cover them here. We believe the two main causes of acid reflux are things that interfere directly with the lower esophageal sphincter or create low acid inside the stomach. And those things are a bacteria called H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori and candida or candida albicans. H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori is a bacteria that has been in humans for thousands of years, and we currently believe it infects up to half the world's population. However, it doesn't react in everybody the same way. In some people, it causes acid reflux, in some people it can cause stomach ulcers, and in some people it even causes stomach cancer. The World Health Organization has labeled this a group 1 carcinogen, which is a substance we know causes cancer. Here's how we think H. pylori is causing acid reflux. First, it produces an enzyme called urase, and urase's job is to decrease the acidity of the stomach to allow the H. pylori to survive. When you have high levels of acid inside the stomach, H. pylori is less likely to survive. If, however, you manage to suppress your acid levels temporarily, you then have more chance of catching H. pylori, which then releases the urase enzyme and makes it harder to kill. The problem is that when you reduce those acid levels, then sometimes the lower esophageal sphincter doesn't close properly because now the stomach doesn't have enough acid. Secondly, H. pylori can create pressure inside the stomach from some of the byproducts like hydrogen that put pressure on that lower esophageal sphincter, sometimes forcing it open, allowing the acidic content of the stomach to end up inside the esophagus, causing the burning. Candida, on the other hand, works by interfering with the lower esophageal sphincter directly, and that interference can lead to the gastric contents of the stomach ending up inside the esophagus. Candida is also a common cause of what we call silent acid reflux. This is where you get dry cough, hoarse throat, lump in the throat sensations like a globus, feeling like something stuck, which is causing damage to the esophagus, but you don't necessarily feel the pain. One of the reasons that H. pylori and candida can both cause these symptoms is because they can colonize the esophagus, which is why they don't often show up when you do an endoscopy. In an endoscopy, you're checking for the stomach, for bacteria, but you're not checking the esophageal tissue and you're not checking the oral cavity. Both H. pylori and candida can affect the tongue, the tonsils, the esophagus, the mouth, and even the teeth. The problem is we don't currently have any tests to detect them in those areas. Which now brings us to the food. Most people believe that food is causing their acid reflux. We don't agree. We think the food is a trigger when the underlying problem is likely to be things like H. pylori and candida overgrowth. For example, if you've ever had H. pylori like I have, you'll know that it doesn't seem to matter what you eat. You get that constant burning, constant stomach pain all of the time, no matter what you eat or drink. However, there are some herbs that you can take directly to kill H. pylori, which is why we developed Pylopurge, which is a blend of 5 different herbs to reduce both the pain and the symptoms of H. pylori and the number of H. pylori inside your stomach. If you like to use that because antibiotics are not your thing, then I would put those capsules into water, swish them around your mouth, gargle and swallow. That way it'll affect not only the stomach, but the esophagus and the oral cavity to rule it out there too. Now, candida overgrowth is a little bit more sensitive to foods. Things like chocolate and coffee, alcohol, sugars, and some types of fruit like grapes can trigger the reflux and make it worse. Temporarily, we like to remove these foods that trigger your reflux while we fix the root cause problem with a product called Yeast Purge. Now, Yeast Purge contains 5 different herbs to kill the overgrowth of yeast, plus 3 different herbs to build up beneficial bacteria like bifidobacterium, which we believe then controls the remaining yeast. Remember, yeast is symbiotic in our system. In small amounts, it can be really beneficial for you. But in cases where you've had too many antibiotics, for example, and now the yeast tends to overgrow, that's when it becomes a problem. We believe you should be able to eat whatever you want without having to change your lifestyle, but only once you get to the root cause of your problem. So if you can't eat tomatoes and you can't drink a glass of wine and you can't eat a curry, we don't believe those foods are the issue. We believe it's your body that's the issue, and something in there like bacteria like H. pylori or overgrowth of yeast like candida is causing your problem. Let's touch quickly on hernias. It is my opinion that hernias are not the root cause of your reflux, but a symptom of an underlying problem. For example, we know that H. pylori can create pressure inside the stomach, which can force the lower esophageal sphincter up and then allow the stomach to slide up into the esophagus. That's often why you see what's called a sliding hiatal hernia. It slides up and it slides back down again because that sphincter is not closed. But again, we believe that that is a symptom and not a root cause problem, which is why some people do the surgery and find that temporarily it works okay, but then they get the problem back again. I've also worked with lots of people who are able to fix their underlying hernia, not directly by targeting the hernia, but by fixing the root problem, which was almost always a H. pylori issue. Another cause of acid reflux and GERD that we haven't spoken about in similar videos is not having a gallbladder. Now, your liver's job is to produce a substance called bile, and bile is stored inside your gallbladder. And when you eat a large fatty meal, your gallbladder squirts out bile into the small intestine to help you break down fat globules from large ones into smaller ones. This is when your pancreas helps take over by producing an enzyme called lipase that breaks the globules down even further. However, when you don't have a gallbladder, you can't produce enough bile on demand when you eat a large fatty meal. And for some reason, you end up with bile inside your stomach. Bile should definitely not be inside the stomach. It works in the small intestine, and so bile in the stomach can cause acid reflux, gastritis, and even hernias in some people. It's also why people get constipation and diarrhea and a lot of bloating problems because they can't digest their food properly. In cases of people not having a gallbladder, we normally recommend they take some supplements like ox bile and lipase to help improve the digestion of fats so that they don't run into fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies like vitamin A, D, E, and K. The downside of not having a gallbladder is that you're always going to struggle to digest these fats, and so the supplements you take are normally for life. I will link to some of our favourite fat digesting supplements in the description below. Hopefully that video has been helpful to you. If you like these, please follow along and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.